Okay, parents, your kids are going to turn out just fine.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by FOCO. That's FOCO, F-O-C-O. If you are a parent of a child or teen with ADHD, you know how challenging it can be to keep them focused and engaged. FOCO is the all-natural solution for ADHD, whether it's for school, homework, or just everyday activities. FOCO helps your child or teen stay calm and attentive. Before trying prescription drugs like Adderall that can come with harsh side effects, I recommend you try FOCO. Visit ThinkFOCO, that's ThinkFoco, thinkfoco.com for more information. Welcome to the Your Kids Will Be Fine podcast. I am Dr. Michael Malopsky, board-certified pediatrician and parent of 7. On the Kids Will Be Fine podcast, we're here to help you sort through a lot of the glut of information that comes at us as parents from social media, from the internet and society in general, and help us really get to the core of what's important and help us understand that we can get rid of some of the anxiety about the choices that we make around parenting so we know that our kids will be fine. Today, we're going to talk about issue more specific to adolescents, parents of teenagers. By far the most misunderstood issue, especially in Colorado, is around the safety of cannabis in teenagers, high school kids. The reason why is that the cannabis industry, which is in our state and I know many other states, extremely active. Here, almost 75% of kids by the time they get out of high school have tried cannabis more than once, marijuana, in multiple forms. And therefore, there is a lot of misinformation that kids are exposed to, mostly from the cannabis industry and from other kids, that really creates a lot of misinformation about how cannabis affects this age group. I want to go on record as saying that for sure, when it comes to adults, and when I say adults, the age at which our brain has generally finished its critical wiring and development, which is usually after the age of 25, cannabis is probably safer than alcohol, and consenting adults who want to use it responsibly should have that option. What I am here to provide is some nuanced discussion that how cannabis works and its impact on our brain is different in the developing brain, especially the developing brain of a teenager, and is very different from the more finished product of an adult, and therefore should be treated differently and should be understood differently. And the truth is, parents, where your child is getting it can be anywhere, and they are not going to be providing that information. Your child is going to get the message that cannabis is safe and it's natural and it has no downside. So we're going to talk about, in brief, really that cannabis has a huge cascade of negative impacts. And once again, this has to do with regular repeated use, not necessarily singular episodic use. We're talking more habitual use in the developing brain. If you want a more scientific-based discussion about this, there is a great book that summarizes a lot of the current research on this. You can buy it on Amazon, called Cannabis and the Developing Brain. It's edited by two, I think, pretty reputable scientists. I own the book. I've read it. And it's a little bit heavy on the hard science, but if you're interested in that stuff, it's edited by Mellis and Manzani. And Cannabis and the Developing Brain will give you at least the hard science around why this discussion is different with teenagers than it should be with adults. So first off, where cannabis acts is at the site of what we call the endocannabinoid system, which there are receptors for this system distributed all throughout our nervous system, and especially our central nervous system in our brain, distributed through our limbic system, which is our emotional brain, and into our more frontal cortex, which is our modern thinking, executive functioning brain. During this critical window of brain development, and of course those critical windows are all through childhood, but adolescence is a particularly critical window for this very complex interplay and wiring between our limbic and emotional brain and our reasoning, logical frontal cortex brain, and how those two interact and work together. Remember, emotions have an enormous amount to do with how we think, how we feel, how we process information, how we remember things. And so it turns out that these receptors, the CB1 receptor and CB2 receptor, which are present in very, very large amounts, are really important in this process. Our body makes what we call endogenous cannabinoids, but they are the elements in our body that interact with these receptors in staged, nuanced, timed amounts that have to do with the knitting together, healthy knitting together of our central nervous system when it comes to the delicate balance that these things play in our cognitive development. So when that developing brain is flooded with marijuana, which is delta-9 THC, which is the psychoactive element in cannabis, that substance has a very high affinity for those receptors, and when those and turn on those receptors in a way that is very different from the natural, timed, staged way that our internal system is meant to work. And so it's very clear from lots of research, animal and human research on people who use regularly, that there is a disruption in the natural and normal development, healthy development of this system, which has long-term consequences on adult functioning. Adult functioning with cognitive performance, with memory, with processing speed, with emotional regulation, with mental health. And all those things are impacted by early habitual cannabis exposure. The things that, and this is not really an argument, and it's not really up for debate. It is clear and it is true. And this is the nuance that's lost when kids seek their own information, because they're getting information that more applies to the brain that is no longer undergoing these changes in the same way, which is brains of people over age 25. And so I see over and over and over in our mental health clinic, teenagers and young adults who have become addicted to cannabis. And that's the other thing that they are often told, is that it is not addictive, and that is not true. Cannabis is highly addictive in its own way. Yes, it's a different physiologic addiction mechanism compared to heroin or alcohol, but it is addictive. And therefore, these kids come and they are completely emotionally dysregulated. They don't understand why their anxiety and or their ADD is being completely hijacked and can't be controlled and is getting worse. And why they're having the symptoms that they're having. They can't function, they can't pay attention in school, and maybe they never had problems before they started regularly using cannabis. So whenever I'm treating kids for mental health issues and cannabis addiction is part of it, I always start by saying, I can't help you, we can't get better until we remove cannabis from the equation and reset the system without cannabis. The issue that is often brought up by, I think, parents is that they are comparing their experience with cannabis to their kids. Well, I grew up in the 70s and 80s. It didn't seem to have this effect on me. And the thing that's most important to point out is that the cannabis that your kids now, especially in Colorado and wherever else it's legal, are getting a hold of is very different than cannabis from the 70s and 80s. When you were smoking a joint in 1978, listening to Bad Company, you were getting 3, 4, 5% THC. And it was very easy to self-regulate the effect. You would just stop when you felt the way you wanted to feel. What more and more kids are getting exposed to are derivative synthetic products that are made from cannabis but are put in the form of a concentrate of oil, a wax, a dab. The cannabis is sometimes 30%, 40% or more. The potency is sky high. You no longer have the same option to self-regulate, and the system is flooded with massive doses at every single use. So the neurocognitive impact and potential for problems in the developing brain is way higher. It is not the same experience of wearing jean jacket, Rolling Stone, 1970s and 80s cannabis that you smoked in college. It's different. And so what I want to caution parents, and one of the bigger problems I see is that parents don't treat it or consider it to be a threat to their child's well-being. They're comparing their own experience in their youth and feel that, how bad could it be? They could be doing much worse things. But what I'm saying is that it is a huge threat to your child's cognitive development during a very critical window of this developmental phase in your teenager's brain. And it can permanently change their potential. So don't discount it. Take it seriously. Have meaningful conversations with your child, and you be the one to provide them the information, not necessarily from their peers or from the cannabis industry. And be aware that this is a very, very real and very important topic for your child's mental health. Recent studies on the topic of mental health and cannabis have come out that there is also a significant association with psychosis, meaning that if there is a family history of psychosis or psychotic disorders in your family, early exposure to cannabis during this window can be a critical element in your child expressing those symptoms, which can be crippling for life. So please take that under consideration. Please take cannabis seriously when it comes to your kids. It is not the same issue as it is for an adult. And remember, you can find us at yourkidswillbefine.com. All the episodes are downloadable, and all the platforms where you normally find podcasts, Apple, Spotify, and every other platform. We'd love to hear your feedback, thoughts, and suggestions. Thanks.